Hello, I hope you're well. It's Friday evening and it is the end of my work week and I have next week off. Next week is Thanksgiving week and I just took a couple extra days off. I have the whole damn week off and I am very excited about that. Work has been tiresome lately and I haven't had a lot of energy to do videos. If you have or haven't noticed, I don't know. I haven't done a lot of videos lately. So I plan on doing a couple videos, probably do another live stream. So if you watch this and you're part of you want to be part of the live stream, I was thinking about doing that. Maybe tomorrow, actually, Saturday. Saturday, I don't know, what is it? What would that be? The 18th? What's today? 17th, right? So November 18th. What do you guys think? I like doing the streams, man. I like them. It's fun. Me blathering into the camera all alone only goes so far. I definitely lose interest after a couple of minutes. So when I have people in here to or in here in the chat room or in the live stream, whatever you want to call it, it's better for me for sure because I can bounce ideas off of people and it's fun. I always think I'm going to do it for about an hour or two, no more than an hour, and then they last for well over an hour. In fact, I think one of them was 2 hours, but yeah, I was thinking about doing it tomorrow, which is the 18th. So I don't know. Hopefully, you guys will be around. Maybe not, but I like doing those live streams. They're fun. But tonight I was inspired to do a video on another reissue. I know I always talk about how I don't really ever buy reissues, but I've bought several lately. I'm not even going to talk about some of them tonight. I talked about a few earlier this week, and I have a whole handful of others, and I'm going to talk about one tonight. But I've been buying reissues lately. I don't know. Sometimes I just love an album so much that I want to have an updated copy of it. I'm interested to hear the differences and see the differences. Is the packaging any different? Sonically, is it any different? Are the labels different? It is kind of interesting sometimes. If I really like the album, I will double dip. And I don't know. This album is 30. What it came out in 1987, so 36 years old. So is it double dipping if it's been 36, 35 years since you bought the original? I don't know. Maybe there's a statute of limitations on that. After 5 years, it's no longer double dipping. I don't know. But tonight, I'm going to talk about this. In my opinion, for my money, the greatest compilation ever that's ever come out. I can't think of a single compilation that is better constructed, has better versions. This this album not only obviously is one of the greatest bands that has ever graced our earth, but it also does such a phenomenal job of taking all the best versions and putting them all on here. It just does such a great job. And we're going to talk about this tonight. New Order Substance, 1987. And this is a band that I hold very close to my heart. I know a lot of us do. And in fact, this is a band that I have avoided talking about on this channel because I think, over the years I felt like New Order is one of those bands that I'm kind of getting sick of. It's not New Order's fault. I just think they're so overplayed. They're everywhere. Everyone loves them to some degree, and they're sometimes I just feel like the world is saturated with New Order. It's enough already. And I don't like recent New Order. I don't like the fact that they continue to call themselves New Order without Peter Hook in the band or Gillian Gilbert for that matter. I don't like that. I don't like the fact, for very simple fact, that their music is shit now. I defy anyone to tell me anything, any good album they've released since Republic, and Republic has got some major problems too. This is a band that I don't think has released a really good album since Technique in 1989. It's been that long, 34 years. So I have a serious love-hate relationship with these guys. I just don't think they're very good anymore. I think they don't really give a shit, and they go on tour to make their money, and then they go home, and they don't bother writing anything good anymore. They don't even try, in my opinion. But that will never take away the fact that this everything this band did in the 80s is brilliant. And there's no better testament to that fact than this right here, Substance. This, and yeah, I avoid talking about New Order because it's just enough already. It's not like you haven't heard of these guys. It's not like you have no clue where they're from and what they do and who they are and what other band they came from. And we all know. And if you're looking for an origin story here in my video, you're not going to get it. Those of you who watch my videos know that I do not bore my audience with talking about where a band came from and how the album came to be. Go read Wikipedia for that shit. I'm going to give you opinions and my personal experience with this. We all know who New Order is. This world has been saturated with New Order stuff in recent years. But I'm going to try to encapsulate why this band was so magical in the 80s. That's one thing that the younger people, cannot ever experience. If you weren't here in the 80s experiencing this, then you will never know what it was like. New Order now is not anywhere near what it was then. Sure, you can listen to the music, but hearing it in the 80s was something altogether different. Now, hopefully I can try to illustrate what I mean by that. And yeah, it's just too much. It's too much. You know, if I have to hear Blue Monday one more time, I might throw up. It's enough with Blue Monday, okay? Blue Monday's a brilliant song, yes, I know. We all know this. It's been covered countless times, and it's the best-selling 12-inch of all time. Yes, we know this. But you know what? They have better songs, and those better songs are right here. And I'm just going to kind of encapsulate their albums. And this will probably be the only New Order video I ever do because I'm not interested in treading over things that people have talked about ad infinitum. I'm just not going to do it. So, this, if you were to have one New Order release, in my opinion, it would be this. If you had every New Order record ever made, which I essentially do, I'll make this about myself. If I had to get rid of every New Order record that I own in my collection, every album, every 12-inch, everything, every 7-inch, you name it, I could only keep one, it would be this, Substance. This really, if you cut down to the bare bones, the bare nuts, the nuts and bolts, and that's not code for anything, by the way. If you had to get down to the bare essentials, and you could only keep one record that houses all of their best tracks and the best versions of those tracks, and that's important. Versions matter with this band. It would be Substance. Argue with me on this point, but I will win this argument. This is the only thing you need to own from New Order, in my opinion. And I know that might be a controversial statement, but I'm saying think about it. If you can only have one thing, one record, think about that. I would love to hear your responses and your replies and your comments. But for me, it's not even close. It's a no-brainer. Substance would be my choice for my one and only New Order material possession. I got this. Let's see. I'm trying to think of what my introduction to New Order was. Because I wasn't old enough to be around when their early shit came out. Like when Movement came out and Power, Corruption, and Lies came out. I think I learned of them with Low Life in 1985. I guess I was 12. I know I'm dating myself, but whatever, it's true. I was 12, and I think Low Life was my intro to this band. And they showed their videos on MTV, like The Perfect Kiss, which for me personally is the greatest thing they've ever done. I'll get to that in a minute. And the version you want is on here. Again, versions matter. If you think you've heard Perfect Kiss and you've never heard the 12-inch version, you haven't heard that song yet. So Low Life was my intro to this band. And to this day, other than Technique, Low Life is my favorite New Order album. And that's a close second to Technique. I think they hit their absolute peak with Technique. I think it's their one perfect album, in my opinion. That's the cool thing about New Order. Their albums are kind of sloppy and messy. They're not always perfect. In fact, I only think there is one perfect album, and that's Technique. Low Life's a close second, but that's the cool thing about 80s New Order is they took chances and risks, and it sounded different. And it didn't always work, but it was always interesting. It was never boring, like I think their recent music is. I think it's very boring. But in the 80s, they didn't, boring wasn't in their repertoire. That was a word they didn't subscribe to at all. And Technique is my Technique is their best album, I think. But this came out right before Technique, or a couple years before Technique. This album basically encapsulated every album up through Brotherhood, and then a couple of new songs came out on this too. And yeah, I mean, sometimes I think if you were to have like a perfect compilation of New Order, it would be everything from their 80s output plus Regret. I have to put Regret in there too. Republic is a terrible album. I don't care if you disagree with me or not. I'm a huge New Order fan, and I get to say that. Republic is a piece of shit. But Regret is an amazing song and one of their best singles, and it just is. So yeah, I think to create a truly perfect New Order comp, you'd probably have to do everything up through Regret, because the singles that came from Technique are just unbelievable. Fine Time, Round and Round, Run. Those are, and then there are songs like Vanishing Point that should have been a single, but that's a different video. But this is their best. This is their best release, and it's hard to overstate why this compilation I feel is the best compilation that's ever been put to wax. When I bought this in 1987, a lot of it was new to me because I didn't own all the 12 inches at that point. I was still pretty young and I was still trying to catch up. And you know, New Order was a band back then that they released a lot of single only songs, records that were not on an album. Like Blue Monday was not on an album. If you're in America, Blue Monday was part of Power, Corruption, and Lies, but originally that was not on the album. It was not an album track. That was a 12-inch only. Um, think of all the songs. Think of all your favorite New Order singles, and a lot of them are here. Were they on the album? No. Ceremony wasn't on an album. Temptation, not on an album. These are single only tracks. Um, True Faith, that's a single only. Thieves Like Us, one of their greatest songs, not on an album. So that's something I really miss about music in general. There were a couple of bands that Smiths did that too. The Smiths would do that. And both bands from Manchester, I might add. But they put a lot of weight on that. They put a lot of attention and detail to their 12 inches, and that's something I miss. Like Blue Monday. I mean, you know, if any of you have ever seen 24-Hour Party People, which I highly recommend you do, by the way, that's a great movie. I think in terms of like musical biographies, that's one of the better ones. It's excellent. It's really well acted, well directed. It's funny. It's not perfect, but 24-hour Party People, especially for someone like me who was alive in the 90s and I loved that music. It covers all the it cover well if you've seen it, you know it's about factory records, and that's what New Order was on. But I highly recommend you watch that movie. I think it focuses on the kind of energy that this type of music produced, just in the clubs and just in the air. You could feel it. This was a special band, and they were still kind of underground then. They weren't so over the top like they are now. Not everybody knew about them, so you felt like you had a little secret to yourself. New Order was one of those bands, especially here in the United States. I know they were a lot more popular in Europe, and they were popular here in the States too. Nowhere near, though, I think, the popularity they had in the UK, for example. Nowhere near that. But they were definitely popular here in the United States. But it was still kind of our little secret. They were this cool band from Manchester, and you got to tell people about them. Not everybody knew about them. You really didn't hear them on the majority of radio stations. If you lived in New York or LA, you did. But if you lived outside of those towns, which the majority of Americans do, you didn't hear this shit on the radio. You really didn't. You heard some songs pop up in soundtracks, like Bizarre Love Triangle was on Married to the Mob, and you would hear these songs in movies here and there, but for the most part they were kind of like our little secret. But when this came out, I was so impressed with all these different versions because I had heard some of these songs, but these are all the original 12-inch versions here. Well, not all of them. I'll get into that in a minute. But they were different. If you had been listening to the albums and you didn't have the 12 inches, you heard these versions and you're like, oh my God, wow, like a whole different element to these songs now. And you started realizing, like, if you bought the albums and not the 12 inches, you were missing out on this whole other world, a beautiful world. And I think New Order is one of the best 12-inch bands in history. These brilliant songs that they would commit only to a 12-inch and then put out these stunning extended mixes that were just fantastic. I don't know that there's a band better at doing that in history than New Order in the 80s. And this is the document to that, Substance. Brilliant stuff. And I love this from the day I bought it. And yeah, I think this is the one New Order record that I would have to keep if I had to get rid of everything, and that would be an obscene gesture. I know, I'm just playing a game here. If I had to only keep one, it would be Substance. This is it. This is the one New Order record you need. There's nothing to see here, as you can see, just plain white. You get the track listing down here. And I could go on for hours about what this record means to me, but I can remember being in high school listening to this and literally changing my life. And I was happy to get this repress because I've had the original issue on Quest. It came out on Quincy Jones's label here in the United States. And that's a pretty decent pressing, and I've played the shit out of it. It's just, it's got such extreme groove wear. I've played those records, I've hammered them. I used to play them in the clubs, I played them at home, I've had my fingers all over every inch of those records. So I was happy to get this reissue, I really was. And this one's a little funky. These came on colored, two different colored records, and I thought that was kind of fun. I thought when they produced this and they thought of the colors, they did that very thoughtfully. So I'll show those in a minute. I was happy to get this reissue. I don't buy a lot of reissues. I have been lately, though. There have been some really good ones. The sound quality on this is pretty good, too. I don't know. I pulled out my original and listened to that back to this, and I really didn't hear a lot of differences. Now, that might differ from copy to copy. I don't know. But even with the colored vinyl here, this sounds pretty good. And they didn't mess with any of the versions. It's exact same version as it was back in 1987. But the basics are you get 12 cuts here. There's 3 cuts per side. There are 2 records in here. And it's a full double album, man. You're getting 18 to 20 minutes per side, pretty much. Lots of music to sink your teeth into here. And it's all brilliant. There's not a bad moment on here. For me personally, there's one song that I've never been a huge fan of, and I'll get to that in a minute. But the rest of it, I mean, pop music doesn't get any better than this. It doesn't get any moodier than this. It doesn't get any darker than this. It is possible for shiny pop music to have a dark edge to it, and what band is better at that than New Order? I can't think of any. And this compilation is the perfect document for that. Listen, just pick this up if you haven't already. There's no excuse to not own this now. They just reissued it. And this is a very faithful repress. And it sounds good, too. I'll crack this open. This is... Sorry about the glare there. I have a light over here, and the whiteness of these records are shining in my eyes. But this is record 1. There's the track listing. I'll go through this track listing. And you get I always thought this looked like a red check mark, kind of. And this was the thoughtful piece, I thought. They pressed it on red wax. So you get the red check mark, you get the red wax. And I like the labels too. They fashion these labels to look like the original UK release. The release on Quest doesn't have these labels exactly. They're a little different. I like these labels better that say 1987 on it. But yeah, you get red wax. Yeah. And as far as I can tell, it's pressed pretty much the same in terms of where the dead wax begins at the end of each side. It seems to be a pretty faithful repress because a lot of times when they do those reissues, they cram all the music into like this little space, and then you've got that much dead space at the end. It really bothers me because it just that the sound of the record ends up taking a hit when you do that. Anyway, you get the blue flowery image here, and you get the blue flowery vinyl. And yeah, this sounds pretty good, I have to say. Not bad. There you go. There's your colored wax. Blue and red. And I'm going to go through the cuts because, hey, if this is my favorite compilation, it deserves some attention, I think. And why not? Let's talk about this. So, record one, let me get that glare out of there. So, record one, I've always preferred the original version of Ceremony. You get the re recorded one here. And they did this in, when was it, 1980? Okay. Now, see, this one says 1981. I remember on the original press it says 1981, but then re recorded in 1987. I'm not seeing that here. Hmm. I wonder if they put the original version on here. I haven't actually listened to these yet. So I guess because, yeah, it's indicating the other new versions, but not that one. Ooh. So maybe they actually have the original version of Ceremony on here? That would be super cool if they did. That would be a nice chance. That would be an upgrade to the original version, if you ask me. The original version of Ceremony is far superior to the new version they put out for Substance. Everything's Gone Green. Come on. How good can songs get? That's what I have to say about Everything's Gone Green. I think Everything's Gone Green is one of the best, I don't know, post-punk disco songs. And I hate the term post punk, but it's one of the best. Everything's Gone Green is a beautiful song. Anybody who loves techno music and electronic music, I think they would all agree with me. That's some serious early techno shit going on there. New Order proving that they were miles and miles ahead of the pack. That is a brilliant song. Everything's Gone Green. Absolutely one of my favorite New Order tracks, and only on a 12-inch, not on an album. Temptation, new version. That is the new version. That's a tough one to choose between the original and the new one recorded in 1987 here. The original, the original is so lo-fi and quaint in its way, and then this one's so loud and more produced and bombastic. But they're both really, really well done. I really like the live versions they do now too. It's the live version is more of a straight up techno version, I think. Um, it's hard to choose which one I prefer. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know that I have a preference. They're both really excellent versions. Blue Monday, you get the original version of that. We know Blue Monday. I'm not getting into that one. I come on. How many more hours of our lives can we talk about Blue Monday? Confusion. This is the new version. Now, Confusion is one of those songs I never loved from New Order. I like it, not one of my favorites. And this is the new version. I prefer the original version personally, the Arthur Baker remixed, produced one. Um, that's my preference. This re-recorded one isn't bad. They did all these re-recordings in 1987, by the way, when this came out. So you get a updated version of that at the time. And then Thieves Like Us, one of their greatest songs, 12-inch only, never on an album. Unbelievable song. I think Thieves Like Us absolutely is one of their greatest tracks. And you get the 12-inch version here. And these are all 12-inch versions, by the way. There are no edits on here at all, other than the re-recorded versions you get on here, like Blue Monday 12-inch version, Temptation. I don't know if there was ever a longer or shorter version of that anyway, in terms of the original versus the re-recorded one. Thieves Like Us has a 7-inch version, which is excellent, but this compilation is a straight up comp of the extended versions, and I think that's important to remember. Perfect Kiss. The second record starts with that. I think I already mentioned, if I had to pick one cut from New Order, one album, it would be Substance. One cut, it would be the 12-inch version of the Perfect Kiss. I don't think it gets any better than that with New Order. The 12-inch version is absolutely stone cold brilliant. Perfect Kiss. Just an unbelievably amazing song. It's got everything you could possibly want in it. It's got disco and techno and dance and punk and rock. It brings so many elements together, and it's all flawless. Just a 9-minute roller coaster ride. And I want to reiterate, 9 minutes. That's the version you want. The version on Low Life is fine, but you notice it fades away on Low Life. There's still 4.5 more minutes to go. They cut it off at the halfway point on the album. And it's a slightly different version anyway on the album. You want the 12-inch version of The Perfect Kiss. You are depriving yourself of the best version of what I think is the best song New Order ever did. Subculture, not one of my favorite New Order songs. Now, I thought they had put the newer version on this at the time, and I'm not seeing that as a new version. Am I wrong about that? I could have sworn that Subculture was the new version recorded for this. Maybe I'm misremembering that. Shell Shock, again, not my favorite. You'll remember that song being on, what was it, the Pretty in Pink soundtrack, right? Sometimes all John Hughes movies blur together for me, but it's Pretty in Pink, right? That was the song. That was the movie it was in. Shell Shock, not my favorite from them. You do get the extended version of that here. State of the Nation, again, not one of my favorite New Order songs. I think they've done a lot better work, but still a pretty strong song. And then Bizarre Love Triangle, you get the 12-inch version of that, which is a Shep Pettibone remix. Brilliant song. Bizarre Love Triangle is one of their greatest pop songs. And then True Faith. True Faith, one of their greatest. Absolutely. That was the one song that had not been released. Well, it had been. It came out. It came out on a 12-inch when this was released, so it kind of had been released, but it hadn't been around for long. And you get some really long extended versions on the 12-inch. You get the extended vocal, and then you get an extended dub mix. Then you get the B-side, which was 1963, which is one of their greatest songs. I was thinking about this too. If they had reproduced this Substance set compilation and made it even better, I thought it would have been cool if they had included the CD version. The CD version is a double CD. The first CD basically has this, and then the second CD has all the B-sides that came with these 12 inches. So you get In a Lonely Place, which was Ceremony's B-side. Uh, you get the dub to Bizarre Love Triangle. You get 1963, the B-side to True Faith. You get Murder. You get the B-sides. You get Lonesome Tonight. This was a band that even their B-sides were amazing. Again, New Order in the 80s, man. They were on an unbelievable roll, unprecedented roll. These guys were on. Right here. And I would highly recommend you pick up this reissue. I don't recommend picking up many reissues at all, but I don't have many complaints about this. I think it sounds pretty decent, and the colored vinyl's fun. And this is just the greatest compilation ever from one of our favorite bands ever. And I don't know that I have much more to say about it before I start rambling too long. This is going on a half an hour now. But This means a lot to me. New Order was the first concert I ever went to. I was 16 years old. I went to the New Order Technique show. That was the first concert I ever attended. And this band means a lot to me. They always will. It's just there's so much history I have with this band. There's so much greatness, and it is a little disappointing to consider all of the stuff that they've done since Republic. It just hasn't been very good. It sounds like a band that's old and tired and doesn't give a shit anymore. And I guess that's fine, whatever. They're going on their tours and people buy tickets and they go to the shows and they enjoy them. I won't be doing that. I just don't really want to support a band that continues to call themselves New Order without Peter Hook in the band. I don't get that. This is They're not New Order without Peter Hook. I cannot hear this band without that bass line. Sorry. Without his bass, it's not New Order. It just isn't. I think it's bizarre and weird that they would even try to do that. But I guess it doesn't matter. They sell out shows all the time and people go to the concerts and no one, the people that go to the shows don't really seem to care. I will always cherish that moment I got to see them in their prime. I think personally Technique is their greatest album and I saw them at their absolute prime. The kicker is, I always thought this was interesting though. That New Order show was not fun. They didn't sound well. They didn't sound good. They didn't look at the audience. They had a really curious attitude. They seemed really pissed off with each other. After watching documentaries about this band, I think that was probably the truth. They don't seem to like each other very much. But I remember them looking pretty aloof on stage and looking disinterested and playing for just over an hour and then leaving. They just seemed bored. They seemed like they wanted to get the hell out of there, and they didn't sound very good. Um, but it was my first concert, and I will always hold them dear to my heart, especially because it was the Technique tour. Again, I think Technique is absolutely brilliant in every way. But if you're looking for a compilation, if somehow you're new to New Order, maybe you're younger and you're watching this video, this is the best place to start. I think many New Order fans would agree. Like this is the quintessential thing to own from New Order, especially if you're just getting into the band. And I can remember at the time, this was on, like, at least in the United States, this continued to be in the top 200 sales of albums for a good 4 or 5 years after its release. It was really popular here in the United States. It really kind of helped break them in a lot of ways. So I think a lot of people know this compilation anyway. But like I mentioned before, if you're newer to this band and you're younger and you're trying to get into these guys and understand what they're about, you can't go wrong here. New Order Substance. Start here. And it's one of the few times I would recommend somebody not start with their albums because their albums are so different. Their first album is Movement, and I don't think that's far from their best album. You obviously you have to check it out if you're a New Order fan or you're getting into them. You have to listen to it. But I think it's the sound of a band just trying to kind of find their footing after their last band broke up and Ian Curtis killed himself. They just had to figure out where they were going after that. So Movement's kind of an awkward album. I think Power Corruption Lies is brilliant. It's not perfect, but it has brilliant moments. Really fun, just a fantastic album. Tracks like 586, Leave Us Alone, the more obvious tracks like Age of Consent. It's just a brilliant album. Absolutely awesome. Low Life, as I mentioned before, a close second to Technique. That's their rockin' album. It's got plenty of disco and dance on it, but I think Low Life is their most rock and roll album, really, in a lot of ways. It's their most guitar heavy album. Maybe their heaviest album in some ways is Low Life. I think Brotherhood is kind of messy, but it's got brilliant moments on it. I don't think it works as an album necessarily, but brilliant moments. And then Technique. Not a bad moment on that fucker. But after Technique, I think they kind of went down a little bit. Just my opinion. I would love to hear your opinions if you disagree. I know somebody will. But yeah, if someone disagrees with me in terms of like having this place to start, I would love to hear it. I think this is the perfect starting point, Substance. This is brand spanking new. You don't have any reason to not go grab this. I highly recommend it. And man, I was listening to Thieves Like Us today again for the 5 millionth time, and that song's never sounded better. Thieves Like Us. That's a song that I didn't love when I first heard it, but it's grown on me so much over the years. It's just really it's just a perfect pop song. It really is. And the 12-inch version is beautiful, all 6.5 minutes of it. I cannot recommend this enough. Check this out. Even if you have the original, go ahead and grab this. Compare and contrast the versions. This one sounds pretty good. This is a faithful reissue, I think, for the greatest compilation of all time. Substance, New Order. Take care. I'll talk to you next time. Bye.